some of the Crips and the Bloods, two of LA County's most vicious gangs.
Go over there and kill one of them, and they come over and kill one another.
They started this group to stand against the brutal Crips gang, but they soon turned into an even more ruthless force. From vicious murders to assassinations linked to the mafia and even hip-hop conspiracy theories, the Bloods are a force to be reckoned with. But who exactly are the Bloods?
I'll be in the blood, going down with the Bloods. That's how we feel. We die, it's like we go kill one of them.
The Bloods. The Bloods are primarily an African-American street gang founded in Los Angeles, California. Members of the Bloods can be identified by the red color they wear and specific gang symbols, including unique hand signs. According to law enforcement officials, there are believed to be at least 15,000 members of the Bloods across America. However, some other estimates suggest that the total number falls within the range of 20 to 25,000. But here's the thing. It's not just one gang. The Bloods consist of several different gangs stretching across both the East and West Coast. Each individual gang with its conglomerate is referred to as a set. The leaders of these sets collaborate to enhance the overall standing of the organization. The Bloods gang was initially formed to compete against the influence of the Crips in LA. The rivalry began in the late 1960s when Raymond Washington and other Crips attacked Sylvester Scott and Benson Owens, two students from Centennial High School in Compton, California. As a result, they formed the Piru Street Gang, which was the first Bloods gang. During the 1980s, they started distributing crack cocaine in LA. This led to a dramatic rise in membership and the expansion of their presence to other states. Interestingly, there have been many famous Blood members in the music and movie industries. Some surprising members include Cardi B, Kendrick Lamar, Lil Wayne, Tupac Shakur, and Chris Brown. And now that we know who the Bloods are, let's delve deeper into the lives of 10 of their most deadliest hitmen. Number 10. Omar Porti. Omar Porti, aka OG Mack, was only 17 years old when he committed his first robbery, and from that point on, he never looked back. He was arrested on several occasions for robbery, theft, assault, you name it. And by the time he'd reached the legal drinking age, Porti had already become quite familiar with the inside of a prison cell. He was well on his way to establishing himself as a ruthless leader of a notorious prison gang called Universal Blood Nation. But how did this all come to pass? August 1992, Porti was sentenced to 2.5 to 5 years in prison for the criminal possession of a weapon in the third degree. It was during his time at Rikers Island that he joined forces with fellow inmate Leonard OG Deadeye McKenzie to create the United Blood Nation. Initially, it started as a prison gang, but its influence would soon spread far beyond the prison walls, igniting this gang violence from LA to New York City. March 12, 1996. Porti revealed his appetite for violence when he orchestrated a daring attack on members of the rival Latin Kings gang. Armed with a shiv fashioned from a Scrabble game piece, he and his gang slashed 3 inmates. When Porti got out of prison, he wasted no time in making a name for himself. Within months of getting out, he turned the Bronx into his own personal kingdom, where his Bloods ruled over drug dealers, prostitutes, and thieves with an iron fist. And he didn't mess around when it came to recruiting new members. He'd initiate them with a quick 31-second beating, arm them with semi-automatic weapons, and then order them to bash and kill their rivals to earn respect and status. Some of these new recruits were as young as 16. Porti would base himself at 183rd Street and Davidson Avenue, making it clear how he wanted neighborhood disputes settled. When one of his Bloods got into a fight with a Bronx drug dealer called K-Born over some cash, Porti's lieutenant escorted a young gang member to K-Born's place, armed with an AK-47 and an Intratec 9mm semi-automatic assault weapon. They viciously unleashed a hail of bullets worth 30 rounds of ammo into the drug dealer's front door. Now, Porti's reign of terror wouldn't stop there. When a female gang member decided she'd had enough of their fraudulent credit card scheme, she told Porti she was out. Well, let's just say he didn't take that well. He would heat up a knife on a stove and fiercely burn her leg, leaving her permanently disfigured. August 27, 2002, Porti's luck finally ran out. He was convicted of 10 counts of criminal activity, including racketeering, murder, conspiracy, credit card fraud, and drug trafficking. He was sentenced to 50 years imprisonment, currently incarcerated at ADX Florence in Colorado. Number 9. Wardell F. Wardell F, also known as Darnell Bolton or Poochie, was a member of the Bloods involved in the incident that shocked the world of hip-hop, the infamous murder of the notorious B.I.G. Originally from Kentucky, Faust moved to Compton with his family and joined the Mob Pirates, a faction of the Blood street gang, earning himself the nickname Poochie. Poochie's violent tendencies became evident when he was only 14 years old. Following a fight with a boy his age, he resorted to firing a shotgun at his mother's house. Mid-1990s, Poochie developed a close friendship with Suge Knight, the founder and CEO of Death Row Records, who was also affiliated with the Mob Pirates Bloods. And so Knight would recruit Poochie as his bodyguard at Death Row Records. Later on, an artist at DRR described Poochie in an interview.
He was definitely a killer. He looked like it. He acted like it when he came into the room. There was something about him. He wasn't a tall man. He wasn't big, nothing like that. To me, he looked like that he wasn't the one to fuck with.
But what role did Poochie play in the murder of Notorious B.I.G.? March 9, 1997 at 12:30 a.m., Christopher Wallace, famously known as the Notorious B.I.G. or Biggie, was leaving an after-party thrown at the Peterson Automotive Museum. Wallace and his crew were leaving in 2 SUVs, with Wallace sitting in the front seat of the second vehicle. 12:45 a.m., Wallace's SUV stopped at a red light on the corner of Wilshire Boulevard and South Fairfax Avenue. It was at this moment that a dark-colored Chevrolet Impala SS pulled up alongside Wallace's vehicle. The driver of that Impala, described as a black man, pulled out a 9mm pistol and fired multiple shots at Wallace's car. Wallace, struck by 4 bullets, was immediately rushed to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. Following Wallace's death, there was speculation that his murder was somehow connected to the shooting of Tupac Shakur, which had occurred 6 months earlier in Las Vegas. Detective Russell Poole of LAPD took charge of the initial investigation into Wallace's murder. After many months of digging, Poole began to suspect that Suge Knight orchestrated the whole thing, with the help of a corrupt LAPD officer. But these findings were met by backlash from the then chief of the LAPD, and eventually Poole decided to retire and the investigation was stalled. 2006, the case was reopened and led by LAPD detective Greg Kading. His investigation concluded that Wallace was shot by none other than Wardell Poochie F, whom Suge Knight contacted through his then-girlfriend Teresa Swan. During that investigation, he discovered that Knight allegedly bought an Impala for Poochie before the murder of Biggie. Additionally, Swan had confessed to being involved in the murder. The FBI sent her to get a confession from Suge Knight in prison while wearing a wire. However, Knight didn't say anything incriminating during the visit. But why wasn't Wardell F arrested and charged with the murder? July 24, 2003, Wardell F died just 2 days after his 43rd birthday. He was shot 10 times in the back by gang member Lil Rod while riding his motorcycle in Compton. His murder was the result of a feud between 2 blood sets. Unfortunately, the case will never be fully solved, and it looks like Poochie's death might be the only justice this case will ever see. But what about Suge Knight and those circumstances that led to Biggie's murder? Let's find out. Number 8. Suge Knight. Marion Hugh Suge Knight, an American record executive and the co-founder and former CEO of Death Row Records, played a pivotal role in the commercial success of gangsta rap during the 1990s. This label boasted famous rappers like Dre and Snoop. 1995, Tupac Shakur began serving a sentence of up to 4.5 years. Knight saw that as an opportunity and struck a deal with Shakur. He posted his bail, freeing him from prison, and signed him to Death Row Records. The following year, the label released Shakur's greatest commercial success, All Eyes on Me. However, tragedy struck that September. After leaving a Tyson boxing match in Las Vegas, Knight and Shakur, along with others, assaulted Orlando Anderson, a member of the Crips. 3 hours later, while Knight was driving, someone shot into the car, fatally wounding Shakur and injuring Knight. Shortly after that incident, the LA Times published a two-part series titled Who Killed Tupac Shakur? According to this story, the shooting was carried out by the Crips as retaliation for Shakur's attack on Orlando Anderson. The article suspected Anderson as the shooter responsible for the fatal shots. The police made Anderson a person of interest, but he was later killed in an unrelated gang shooting, and the case was closed. The article also implicated Christopher Biggie Wallace, Shakur's rival at that time. It alleged that Wallace had paid for the gun used in the shooting. 6 months after Shakur's death, Wallace met the same fate in a similar drive-by shooting. Although never charged with any involvement in the murder, Suge Knight has been at the center of many numerous theories regarding these two great rappers. One theory, proposed by ex-detective Russell Poole, suggests that Knight had Shakur killed before he could part ways with Knight's label. Poole believes that Knight conspired to kill Biggie in order to divert attention from himself and Shakur's case. Another theory out there is saying that Knight had Biggie murdered in retaliation for Shakur's fatal shooting. That theory gains credibility due to the rivalry between the Crips and Bloods, as Shakur was also affiliated with the Bloods.
Tupac loved Death Row. Tupac loved me, I loved him.
As we previously mentioned, the Biggie murder theory implicates Knight, a rogue cop, and Wardell F. During the time of Biggie's murder, Suge Knight was in county jail. To communicate with Faust, he'd had to go through Teresa Swan, who was on his visitor list. Despite her confession, no charges have ever been filed against Suge Knight. September 2018, Knight stood trial for voluntary manslaughter in a fatal 2015 hit-and-run. He received 28 years in prison and is currently incarcerated at R.J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego. He won't be eligible for parole until October 2034. Number 7. Reges Dion Thomas. Reges Thomas is a convicted murderer who had been sentenced to death for the brutal killings of 2 police officers. Thomas had always been drawn to violence, being a member of the notorious bounty hunter Blood Street Gang. January 31, 1992, his first murder took place when he shot a man named Carlos Adkins in a Torrance apartment. A year later, Thomas would strike again. Around 11 p.m., officers Burrell and McDonald made a routine traffic stop in Compton. They pulled over Thomas, who was driving a pickup truck. As the cops got closer, Thomas got out and opened fire, knocking both the officers to the ground. During the trial, it was shown that Thomas had shot the officers execution style, aiming for their heads. Despite wearing bulletproof vests, the officers were defenseless. They were found lying face down near the patrol car. After the shootings, Thomas calmly returned to his truck and drove away. This had sparked a massive manhunt that ultimately led to Thomas's arrest and conviction. April 6, 1993, Thomas was found guilty of these murders. He was sentenced to death on August 15, 1995. He's currently on death row, awaiting execution at San Quentin State Prison. Number 6. Ronald "Da Riggs" Heron. June 26, 2014, Ronald "Da Riggs" Heron was found guilty of several charges, including racketeering, drug dealing, and being the mastermind behind 3 murders. These charges linked Heron's leadership to a violent blood gang in Brooklyn. During the trial, the prosecutors were able to prove that Heron committed a ton of violent crimes to support his drug trafficking operations. 2001, Heron killed Frederick Brooks, but he got off the hook for that murder in the state court because the witnesses were too scared to testify. Looks like Heron and his goons got to him. After getting released from state custody, Heron took control of the drug trade in Gowanus and Wyckoff Gardens. And then he goes on to murder his 2 rivals, Richard Russo in 2008 and Victor Zapata in 2009. Heron was so proud of his crimes that he bragged about them in songs and videos. He called himself the leader of the Murderous Mad Dogs, a set of the Blood Street Gang, and claimed that he had beat a body before. Not only that, but during his trial, a drug dealer from Brooklyn named Saquon Wallace told the jury that Heron told him to dress up in a wig, lipstick, and makeup so he could track down and kill another drug dealer named Jabari Foster. Heron wanted Foster dead because he was still selling drugs in Wyckoff Gardens, defying Heron's orders. April 2, 2015, Ronald Heron was sentenced to 12 terms of life in prison plus 105 years. Number 5. Bashon Shelton. Employed by the Albanian mob, Bashon Shelton was a notorious hitman affiliated with the Bloods gang. October 2018, Shelton, along with his partner in crime, Hyman Ross, carried out a chilling assassination at a Mickey D's drive-thru in the Bronx. Their target, Sylvester Zatola, an associate of the Bonanno crime family. But here's where things get even more twisted. A year prior to this shocking incident, Anthony Zatola, Sylvester's own son, had actually hired Shelton to eliminate both his father and older brother Salvatore. The motive? Anthony's desperate attempt to gain control over a staggering $45 million real estate empire. Shelton wasted no time in assembling a team of accomplices to carry out these heinous acts. Together, they would embark on a year-long conspiracy, plotting a series of violent attacks against Sylvester and Salvatore Zatola. December 27, 2017, 3 armed men would invade Sylvester's residence, brutally assaulting him. They pistol-whipped him in the back of the head, stabbed him multiple times, and even slashed his throat. It's really nothing short of a miracle that Sylvester survived this. July 11, 2018, Salvatore Zatola, the other target of this twisted plot, was ambushed in front of his own home. A cold-blooded assassin fired shots at him, hitting him in the head, chest, and hand. And against all odds, Salvatore miraculously survived this horrifying attack. Shelton just couldn't take any more failures, so he came up with a plan to track Sylvester Zatola. With the help of his fellow Bloods member, Hyman Ross, Shelton managed to place a tracking device on Zatola's car. This allowed them to follow Zatola's every move, leading him to that McDonald's on Webster Avenue. October 4th, 2018. While waiting in the drive-thru to grab a cup of coffee, Ross seized the opportunity and shot Zatola many times, ending his life. Right after the hit, Shelton and Ross swapped texts back and forth, discussing the successful mission. Shelton then contacted Anthony Zatola to break the news, asking him if they could party tonight. Anthony assured Shelton that he would have the payment ready soon. He mentioned having cases of water, which was likely code for the money owed to Shelton. Later, a photo found on one of Shelton's phones revealed a cardboard box filled with bottled water and over $200,000 in cash. June 8, 2023, justice was finally served. Bashon Shelton was given 37 years in prison for orchestrating the murder of Sylvester Zatola and the attempted murder of Salvatore Zatola. And for his co-defendants, Anthony Zatola and Hyman Ross, were sentenced to life in prison. Number 4. Lawrence Lewis. Between January to April 2004 and June 2019, Lawrence Lewis, also known as L. Boogs, utilized his membership in the Blood Street Gang to distribute large quantities of cocaine and heroin in Suffolk County. In order to protect his supply and secure his ability to distribute his narcotics, Lewis possessed many illegal firearms and machine guns. He was known to engage in acts of extreme violence on the gang's behalf. July 29, 2017, Lewis fatally shot and killed John Burt, a member of the Crips, at the Illusions Gentlemen's Club in Deer Park, New York. While Burt and several friends posed for pictures inside the club, Lewis and fellow Bloods approached, and Lewis's associate attempted to display a Bloods hand signal. An argument ensued. Lewis produced a .25 cal firearm and fatally shot Burt in the abdomen. Following the shooting, Lewis confessed that murder to a number of close acquaintances, even sending him text messages saying that he was sleeping good and would do it again. 2021. Lewis forced a woman from Suffolk County into prostitution, forcing her to engage in commercial sex acts until she repaid a debt to him. During that same period, Lewis forcibly assaulted the same woman. And that's not all. Prior to his trial, Lewis and his gang members made efforts to prevent witnesses from testifying against him, threatening to the extreme. July 12, 2023, Lewis was handed life plus 22 years. Number 3. DesShawn James Solomon. June 14, 2020. DesShawn James was caught up in a brutal shootout in the heart of bustling North Minneapolis. This chaotic incident resulted in the death of one, with 6 others injured. More than 100 shots were fired from 12 different firearms. This member of the Bloods gang has quite the rap sheet and a lengthy criminal history. But what happened on that fateful night? According to court documents, a man was robbed inside the Broadway pub, located 200 Broadway Avenue Northeast. The culprit behind this robbery was a Bloods member known as Skits. Surveillance footage captured the whole thing. The poor robbery victim sought refuge in the pub's bathroom, only to be roughly thrown out shortly after. Solomon and two of his companions emerged from that same bathroom not long after the victim made his exit, and that's when all hell broke loose. The footage showed the murder victim hopping into a vehicle, only to make a U-turn and pass by Solomon's car. As the two vehicles crossed, Solomon wasted no time. He jumped out of his car, unleashing a barrage of bullets from his 9mm, aiming directly at the victim's vehicle. The victim was struck in the head, resulting in instant death. April 2023. Karma would catch up with DesShawn James Solomon. He'll spend 438 months in prison. Number 2. Mark Anthony Skeet. Mark Anthony, also known as Mark Brown, was a member of the 9 Trey Gangsters, a branch of the Bloods. June 2014, Skeet made his way to Virginia, intending to profit from the prostitution of adult women in the Richmond area. A few days later, Skeet and his accomplices traveled to Newport News to continue their illicit activities. They were there to exploit a woman from New York involved in prostitution. However, when one of the women's clients couldn't pay up, Skeet fatally shot him. That vicious act was meant to solidify his position within the 9 Trey enterprise. So after the murder, Skeet and his associates fled up to North Carolina to evade capture. But that criminal spree wasn't over. July 16, 2014, they would return to Newport News and commit another murder during a drug transaction. Along with the victim's life, Skeet would also take his money, drugs, and a cell phone. Shortly after, Skeet made his way back to Richmond. After the 2 Newport News murders, Skeet went on to kill 2 more individuals in Richmond. September 17, 2014. Skeet was finally arrested in Richmond when he was found in possession of a firearm. Forensics would later link the weapon to the Newport News murders. December 1, 2021. Skeet was given 75 years in prison, in addition to 2 consecutive life sentences for the 2 Newport News murders. And number 1. Clement Big Evil Johnson. Johnson, a prominent member of the Bloods, had earned a reputation as a ruthless killer. He stood out as this anomaly in the Los Angeles gang scene in the 90s. The police and FBI agents even labeled him as the most dangerous gang member in the city. A homicide detective described him saying,
"He's the type of guy you can have an interesting, articulate conversation with, laugh with, joke with, he'd be cool to you. And then you turn your back on him and he'd blow your brains out."
During his time at Ironwood State Prison in Blythe, where he was serving a drug charge in the early 90s, Johnson officially ran his gang, giving orders for hits and coded phone calls. The number of killings attributed to Johnson and his gang was staggering. According to the police, Johnson is linked to over 20 murders. Even if we consider the lower number that Johnson himself confessed to, which was 13, it still means he took as many lives as infamous killers like William Bonin, the Freeway Killer, or Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. Authorities also suspect that Johnson's gang is responsible for more than 60 other murders. Believe it or not, despite his infamous reputation, the police did have a tough time pinning these terrible crimes on him. 1994, when 2 witnesses stepped forward to testify against him and the gang, the 89 Family Bloods. Both of them were killed. Even when he was finally arrested for the murders of 2 men at a car wash in 91, nobody would admit to being a witness. The reason was simple. If you testified against Big Evil, he'd kill you. But Johnson's winning streak would come to an end when prosecutors finally found 3 witnesses willing to testify to his involvement in the murders. December 12, 1997, Clement Big Evil Johnson was sentenced to death. However, the lead detective on the case made racist comments, which led the judge to rule that Johnson would no longer face the death penalty or life imprisonment without parole. June 2023, Johnson became eligible for parole for the first time. However, I highly doubt any parole board would set him free. After all, Johnson openly confessed that he was programmed to kill. In a 1998 interview, Johnson compared himself to an American soldier sent to Vietnam. He admitted,
We couldn't stop killing our enemies here either. I was one of those sick individuals. I was the epitome of a gang member. I was real. Some people worshipped our Lord Jesus. I worshipped Bloods.